Listen closely, because this might sting. If you keep explaining yourself to people who keep hurting you, you're not being kind. You're abandoning yourself. And the smartest people I know, they don't do that. They don't scream. They don't beg. They don't chase closure. They pause. They breathe. And they choose themselves, even when their voice shakes. Here's the hard truth we avoid. Toxic people don't change because you love them harder. They change only when you stop participating in the chaos. Smart people understand this early. They recognize that constant disrespect is not a misunderstanding, it's a pattern. And patterns require boundaries, not empathy marathons. I've learned that smart people don't waste their energy proving their worth to someone committed to misunderstanding them. They don't sit in rooms where their soul feels small. They don't call it loyalty when it's actually self-betrayal. They name the discomfort. They trust it. That quiet tightening in your chest, that's wisdom knocking. Smart people stop over-explaining. They stop defending their boundaries like they're on trial. They understand that clarity is kind, but clarity without limits is self-harm. So they say less, they watch more. They let behavior speak louder than apologies soaked in excuses. And here's the bravest part. They accept that being seen as cold by someone toxic is often the price of being warm to yourself. They grieve the fantasy of who that person could have been. Then they let it go. Because intelligence isn't about fixing broken people. It's about refusing to break yourself. Smart people don't confront toxicity the way movies tell us to. They don't explode. They don't deliver dramatic speeches hoping for accountability. They understand something quietly powerful. You don't heal in rooms that keep cutting you. So instead of fighting for understanding, they fight for space. Here's what emotional intelligence looks like in real life. It's restraint. It's recognizing when engagement feeds dysfunction. Toxic people thrive on reaction. Your tears, your anger, you're endless explaining. Smart people see this and step back. Not because they're weak, but because they're done being drained. They listen carefully, not just to words, but to patterns. Promises followed by the same behavior. Apologies without repair. Love that feels conditional. And once they see the pattern clearly, they stop negotiating with it. They stop hoping consistency will magically appear. Hope is beautiful, but blind hope is dangerous. Smart people also understand this uncomfortable truth. Not everyone deserves access to your inner world. Sharing your pain with someone who weaponizes it later is not vulnerability, it's exposure. So they become selective. They protect their stories. They stop handing ammunition to people who've already proven they don't handle it with care. And this is where guilt shows up. Because when you stop engaging, toxic people often accuse you of changing, of becoming distant, of being too sensitive. Smart people let those accusations sit without rushing to defend themselves. They know growth often looks like betrayal to those who benefited from your silence. They choose peace over proving a point. Because peace doesn't require permission. Smart people don't try to diagnose toxic people. They don't sit there asking, are they narcissistic? Are they wounded? Are the insecure? Because here's what they know. Understanding someone's trauma does not require tolerating their behavior. Insight without boundaries is just another way to stay stuck. They separate explanation from excuse. Yes, someone may be hurting. Yes, they may have a painful past. And still, your pain matters too. Smart people refuse to rank suffering. They don't minimize their own wounds just to keep someone else comfortable. This is where self-trust becomes everything. Smart people listen to how they feel after interactions. Do they feel smaller, anxious, confused, like they're walking on emotional glass? That data matters more than any charming apology. The body doesn't lie. It keeps the receipts when the mind is tempted to rationalize. They also understand that toxicity isn't always loud. Sometimes it's subtle. It's the eye roll, the passive comment, the withdrawal of affection as punishment, the constant shifting of the goalposts. Smart people don't wait for obvious abuse to give themselves permission to leave. Discomfort is enough. Consistent unease is enough. And when they set boundaries, they don't overperform kindness. They don't soften the message so much that it disappears. They are calm. They are firm. They say things like, this doesn't work for me anymore. No drama, no justification tour. Because here's the truth they live by, boundaries are not walls to punish others. They are doors to protect your nervous system. And protecting your nervous system is an act of profound intelligence. Smart people don't argue with people who are committed to misunderstanding them. Let that sink in. They've learned, often the hard way, that some conversations are not bridges. They are traps. Traps designed to keep you explaining, defending, shrinking, and doubting yourself. So instead of debating reality, smart people disengage, not abruptly, not cruelly. Intentionally, they stop correcting every lie. They stop chasing fairness from people who benefit from confusion. They understand that clarity is internal before it is ever external. This is where emotional maturity shows up loud and clear. Smart people notice when every discussion turns into a power struggle, when accountability is flipped into blame, when your feelings are met with logic meant to erase them. And at that moment, they stop offering their truth to someone who keeps twisting it. They don't need the toxic person to agree with them in order to trust themselves. That's huge. They release the fantasy of mutual understanding. They accept that some people will never see them clearly, and that doesn't mean they are unclear. Smart people also recognize when silence is the boundary, not the silent treatment, that's control. But chosen silence, the kind that says, I will no longer volunteer for harm, they step back. They limit access. They let distance do the explaining words never could. And yes, this can feel lonely. Walking away from chaos can feel like walking into emptiness. But smart people know this. Peace feels unfamiliar before it feels safe. And they are willing to sit in that discomfort because chaos, no matter how familiar, is no longer home. Smart people stop trying to be the bigger person when that phrase becomes a trap. Because being the bigger person is not about enduring disrespect with a smile. It's about refusing to abandon your self-respect in the name of being liked. They realize something painfully liberating. You can be compassionate and distant. You can wish someone healing without offering them access. You can love people from afar. And sometimes that's the healthiest kind of love there is. Smart people don't confuse empathy with self-erasure. They don't keep shrinking themselves to make others comfortable. They notice when they're over-functioning, giving, over-explaining, over-forgiving, while the other person takes without reflection. And when they notice that imbalance, they stop adjusting themselves to fit someone else's dysfunction. This is where boundaries get real, not as ultimatums, not as threats, but as quiet, consistent actions, fewer responses, shorter conversations, clear limits around time, energy, and emotional labor. Smart people know boundaries are not what you say once, they're what you enforce repeatedly. And here's the part that hurts. When you stop being endlessly accommodating, toxic people often escalate. They test the boundary, they provoke, they guilt. Smart people expect this. They don't interpret it as failure. They see it as confirmation that the boundary was necessary. They stay steady. They don't collapse into old patterns just to relieve tension. Because they've learned this truth deep in their bones. The discomfort of holding a boundary is temporary, but the pain of breaking it lasts far longer. Smart people understand that toxicity is not always about what is said. It's about how you feel when you're alone afterward, drained. Doubting yourself, replaying conversations at 2 a.m., wondering if you imagined the harm. That mental exhaustion is a signal, not a flaw. So they stop gaslighting themselves. They stop rewriting reality to protect someone else's image. They stop saying, maybe I'm too sensitive, when what they're really experiencing is repeated emotional erosion. Smart people trust the accumulation. One moment can be forgiven. A pattern demands action. They also stop chasing closure. This is a big one because closure sounds mature, but with toxic people, it often becomes another door into the maze. Smart people accept that some endings don't come with understanding, apologies, or accountability. They come with distance. And distance is enough. Instead of one final conversation, they choose one final decision to stop reaching out, to stop checking, to stop hoping for a version of the person that only exists in memory or fantasy. That choice is not dramatic, it's devastatingly quiet. And in that quiet, grief shows up. Smart people let it. They grieve the relationship they wanted, not just the one they had. They grieve the effort they poured in, the potential, the time. They don't rush that grief or shame it because they know this grieving a toxic relationship doesn't mean it was healthy. It means you were human. And honoring that grief is how you finally begin to come back to yourself. Smart people don't seek revenge. They seek alignment. And there's a massive difference. Revenge keeps you emotionally tethered to the very person you're trying to escape. Alignment frees you. They understand that the most powerful response to toxicity is not punishment. It's detachment. It's removing the emotional hooks. No more explaining. No more defending. No more trying to be understood by someone who refuses to listen. This is where dignity takes center stage. Smart people stop telling their story to people who keep rewriting it. They stop asking for validation from someone invested in their self-doubt. Instead, they turn inward and ask a different question. Does this connection honor who I am becoming? And when the answer is no, they don't dramatize the exit. They simply change their behavior. They invest less, share less, expect less. They let the relationship shrink to its true size or fall away entirely. Toxic people often interpret this as arrogance or indifference. Smart people let them. They don't correct the narrative. They don't chase a better reputation in the mind of someone who already decided who they are. They know that integrity doesn't require an audience. Here's the quiet victory when you stop reacting. Toxic dynamics starve. They lose their power. The chaos has nothing to feed on. And slowly, almost imperceptibly, your nervous system begins to settle. Because peace isn't loud. It doesn't announce itself. It arrives softly when you finally stop handing your energy to places that only knew how to waste it. Smart people rebuild themselves after toxic relationships with intention, not urgency. They don't rush to replace what was lost. They pause, they take inventory, they ask, how did I ignore myself here? Where did I abandon my own needs to keep the peace? This is not self-blame. This is self-respect in motion. Smart people know growth requires honesty without cruelty. They don't shame themselves for staying too long. They honor the part of them that hoped, that loved, that believed. They also relearn what safety feels like. Not excitement, not intensity, safety, calm conversations. Consistency, people whose words and actions line up. At first, this can feel boring because chaos trains us to mistake anxiety for chemistry. Smart people unlearn that lie. They become fiercely protective of their energy. They notice who listens without interrupting, who respects, no, without punishment, who doesn't make them earn kindness. And slowly they raise the standard, not out of entitlement, but out of wisdom. Smart people also stop romanticizing struggle. They no longer believe love has to hurt to be real. They understand that connection should feel grounding, not destabilizing. Supportive, not consuming. And here's the quiet transformation. They start trusting themselves again, their decisions, their instincts, their boundaries. Trust is rebuilt one choice at a time. Every time they walk away from what feels wrong and move toward what feels steady. Because the real glow up after toxicity isn't looking unbothered. It's feeling at home inside yourself again. Smart people stop waiting for toxic people to validate their pain. They stop hoping for the moment when the other person finally says, you were right, I hurt you. Because that moment may never come, and their healing cannot depend on someone else's emotional maturity. They take their power back by naming the truth to themselves. What I experienced was real. What I felt mattered. That self-validation is not arrogance, it's repair. It's how you stitch yourself back together after being slowly unraveled. They also forgive strategically. Not to reconcile, not to reopen doors, but to release the grip of resentment on their own nervous system. Forgiveness for smart people is an internal process. It does not require access. It does not require trust. It does not require forgetting. And they get comfortable being misunderstood. This is a big evolution. Smart people accept that some people will never hear their side because it would require self-reflection, and not everyone is willing to pay that price. So they stop explaining their absence. They stop justifying their peace. They redirect their energy into things that nourish them: purpose, creativity, growth, relationships that feel reciprocal. They build lives so full that toxicity has no place to land. And one day, almost without realizing it, they look back and feel nothing. No anger, no longing, just clarity. Not because it didn't matter, but because they finally chose themselves. That's when you know you're free. And finally, smart people understand this freedom doesn't come from convincing others to change. Freedom comes from refusing to let their chaos live inside you. It comes from choosing clarity over confusion, peace over drama, and self-respect over approval. They know that protecting themselves isn't selfish, it's sacred. Every boundary they enforce, every step they take away from toxicity is an act of courage. They are brave because they do not settle for less than what honors their soul, even when it's uncomfortable, even when it's lonely, even when it feels like everyone else thinks they're overreacting. And here's the most empowering truth of all. You do not need toxic people to validate your worth. Your value is inherent. Your voice matters. Your presence is enough. Smart people remember this every time they let go, every time they close the door, every time they choose to walk away quietly but decisively. They also understand that closure isn't a conversation. It's a decision, a commitment to themselves that they will no longer participate in relationships that diminish their light. They grieve, they heal, and they rise. And they do it without fanfare because their strength is silent, unwavering, and unshakable. So if you want to learn from them, start here, honor your feelings, trust your instincts, enforce your boundaries, and refuse to let anyone define your worth. Toxicity may knock at your door, but you, the wise, courageous, intelligent you, will always choose yourself first, because in the end, choosing yourself is the ultimate act of bravery. And the smartest people in the world know it.